Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Most Accurate Podcast. I am your host, Addison Hayes, joined as always by one of the most accurate rankers in the entire fantasy football community, John Paulson. John, it's been a few months since we hopped in the booth together. Glad to get you back in here for an off-season video and podcast. So how are you doing? How's the past couple months treated you?
It's been all right. Jen actually asked me, our editor, our fearless editor, Jen Akins, asked me how my vacation was, and I just didn't feel like I had really a vacation. We did have some time off with the Super Bowl, and playoffs are a lot less stressful for me projections wise than in season. But I immediately did a couple projects for work, and my son's basketball season was in full effect in January and February. So it just sort of like zip fast forward to now we're in mid-March and free agency's already here. So I'm doing the free agency tracker and free agency preview. And now I'm doing a free agency podcast. So here we are, 2026.
Here we are. Yeah, and what a free agency we had too. I feel like the past few years, I feel like free agency has kind of been a little duller. I don't know if it's because we've had more franchise tag players for like the higher level guys. The big running back here with Saquon and Jacobs and Henry leaving was fun, but I feel like this one was massive just in terms of not. We had a bunch of running backs. We have a decent number of wide receivers. We have some quarterback and tight end movement. It just seems like everything kind of happened all at once, and the movement started early on Monday morning as well, that we just got flooded with notifications of players switching teams, going to this other team for this amount of money that's then going to impact this. Then we got all this Max Crosby drama. I feel like the past like 4 days has been a month of NFL news, and it's been absolutely incredible to see. And we have a lot of stuff to really talk about. Of course, we're going to have all offseason to really digest into this and see how the fantasy community adjusts to all these new landing spots and situations for all these players with ADP. So we're going to have plenty of time to dive into all of that, but we just kind of want to get initial reactions today across pretty much everything that's happened up until this point. So we're going to go basically position by position. I combined the quarterbacks and tight ends together because we just have a couple of names for each position. But we're going to have a lot to talk about for running backs, a decent amount to talk about for wide receivers. But I want to start with the quarterbacks and tight ends, and maybe we'll kick things off with one of the most interesting storylines, which was Malik Willis's kind of rise to being the coveted free agent quarterback of this class, especially given the fact that the rookie class this year is not all that phenomenal. We'll probably only have Fernando Mendoza in the first round. Maybe Ty Simpson out of Alabama sneaks into the first. But I feel like most people are projecting him as a second round pick. So we're just going to have Mendoza going to Vegas. Bunch of teams need a quarterback. Malik Willis was kind of the belle of the ball. He ends up signing with the Miami Dolphins after Tua gets released, who then signs with the Atlanta Falcons. So maybe we can kind of talk about those two hand in hand a little bit. But I think the initial reactions we need to talk about are Malik Willis to the Miami Dolphins. They've released Tyreek Hill as well. They're not moving off of Jalen Waddle or Devon Achane. We have a new offensive coaching staff coming in here. I think you're particularly keen on being able to talk about this whole situation because this is in some ways the Miami Packers with how they've built out their coaching staff and adding Malik Willis from Green Bay. So what are your thoughts on Malik Willis with the Miami Dolphins?
Yeah, I mean, it's a interesting signing for Miami. Willis, quickly became the top free agent quarterback, over the last, I guess, season last couple seasons because he's had some really good stints for the Packers. It's been, as a Packer fan, it's been really nice having Malik Willis as our QB2 because they're from a, I don't know, EPA per dropback standpoint. There wasn't a whole lot of drop off at all, if any, with Love out and Malik Willis in, and that's not really a knock on Love. He's actually been really good the last couple seasons. Last season as well, I saw a bunch of metrics showing him being super effective last year. And when Willis came in, it was like, you watch your backup and then you're just like, oh God, how's this going to go? But just time after time, I think it's the chemistry between him and Matt LaFleur as a play caller. For some reason, and I think it probably has something to do with them just the defense not being ready for Willis's running ability, but also that he showed a big improvement from his time in Tennessee to the time with the Packers and being able to throw the ball as well. In 11 appearances with the Packers, and I was going to go into like how many games is this, but it's basically 3 games. 70 of 89 throwing the ball for 972 yards and an elite 10.9 yards per attempt. And I guess you could argue this is 4 games worth of work, given the fact that he's not a pass heavy type quarterback. He's going to run quite a bit. 6.7% touchdown rate. Didn't throw a single interception. He averaged 6.2 yards per carry. That rushing ability, I think, makes this super interesting from a fantasy standpoint, because I don't think you're just going to hang your head on him as a elite passer, but I think he's a good enough passer that with his ability to run the ball, and if we have a decent offense in place, they've got Bobby Slowick as their offensive coordinator, and I need to do a bit more research on him to figure out what, like, if I was going to make this move, I would have done anything I could to hire Mike LaFleur as my offensive coordinator, because you know that he and his brother would talk about how to get the most out of Malik Willis. But whenever Willis came in, Matt just like got into his bag, and it just seemed like the defense could never catch up to what they were doing. And he threw some great passes for the Packers, and then obviously ran the ball like crazy, and just was really, really effective quarterback. So there's definitely a part of me that's optimistic about him in this situation. Got to kind of see how they replace Tyreek Hill. They still have Jalen Waddle there. And they re-signed Dulcich, the tight end, who had a pretty good little stretch for them. So got to see what the weapons are around him and get a better feel for Slowick as a play caller before I really anoint Malik Willis as the sleeper. But he does strike me as if things go well, he could easily end up in the bottom half of the QB1 production if he's able to be any semblance of the passer that he was with Green Bay, because I think the running is going to translate.
Yeah, I think that feels like the consensus in the community right now with where Malik Willis is probably going to end up being, where he's going to be a favorite, like later round kind of quarterback because of that rushing ability. But I also appreciate that we're not automatically pushing him up to being like the QB8 or QB9 off the board, because there are still some really good names at the top, and there is still risk with Malik Willis in a new situation with teams and defenses having to fully prepare and account for him rather than him just kind of being the backup that comes in. If Love were to get hurt, has a spot start here and there, he is going to be Miami's guy, and they're going to live or die by him for sure. And I think that he's definitely going to be a very popular pick, especially if you wait and you're somebody who likes to draft 2 quarterbacks. Maybe you draft like a safer late round option, like a pocket passer, but then you go for Malik Willis for the ultimate upside of a potential weekly starter. I feel like that's kind of where we're at with Malik Willis. I think the real main question with him is how will this affect Jalen Waddle? Can we still trust Devon Achane, as I feel like his ADP might be late first round, maybe. So is he still going to be trustworthy? Those might be system questions more so than Malik Willis questions. But I do think that seeing that Malik Willis is not a pass volume heavy passer, that might be a little bit worse for Jalen Waddle, even if he is still like the main guy. If they don't really replace Tyreek super successfully, he might still be the guy. But if he's only getting, 20 to 25% of 480 passes, does that translate to a lot for more than being like a wide receiver 2 or something like that?
Yeah, I think it depends on how effective Willis is as a passer, and the 10 plus yards per attempt is a good indicator, but it's over a small sample, so he's not going to average that next year. You started mentioning rankings, and I'm keeping the never too early rankings updated on the site. I moved Willis up to QB 18, and that may sound low, but it's just the quarterback position is just stacked with talent. Just moving up from there, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, Matthew Stafford, Bo Nix, Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes, and Trevor Lawrence, and we're not even into the top 10 yet. So there's just a lot of options at the quarterback position with a lot of talent and good fantasy producers that either had a good fantasy season last year, finished in the top 10, or 2 years ago finished in the top 10 or top 8. Some of these guys, like Baker Mayfield, has had some great games. Matthew Stafford was fantastic last year. Bo Nix was top 10, I believe. So just a lot of guys, even in the 10 through 18 range, where you could easily see them back in the QB1 ranks.
So as I mentioned, Willis signing in Miami was basically brought on by the fact that they had released Tua Tagovailoa, who then is moving on to sign with the Atlanta Falcons. I jokingly tweeted out that Atlanta seems to think that two lefts make a right, because now they will have, or I saw other people mention how, how you really like to have your backup quarterback kind of match the stylistic play of your starting quarterback to keep the offense's play calling similar. Now they're just doing that with left-handed quarterbacks. I think all the jokes are funny with the lefties of Penix and Tua. We don't have to talk much, I think, about Tua because I don't think he really matters too much himself from a fantasy standpoint for quarterbacks. But it's more of a, I guess, kind of heat check on what does this do for Drake London and for Kyle Pitts. Obviously, I think Bijan is in consideration for the 101. I don't think this really impacts him, but it's really London and Pitts. If we're going to presume that Tua is going to be the starter for maybe the first couple of games after Michael Penix's ACL injury, halfway or a little later into the season last year. So if Penix isn't ready to go, it's going to be Tua, and then we might have some disgusting split between the two, depending on who's playing better, which will all impact London and Pitts. But how do you view those two pass catchers?
Yeah, I think initially the take was that he's coming in as the backup, and I did see a quote from the team saying that once Penix is back, there's going to be a competition for the QB1 job. So it looks like it's a pretty good situation for Tua to walk into. At least he has a chance to continue as a starter. I would say that the signing is good for just the season-long rankings for all the Falcons because he's a pretty competent quarterback to have with Penix out. And, if assuming Penix misses the first couple games or month of the season, at least you have a competent starter there. So that kind of boosts their floor. And it also, if there's another injury to Penix, we've got a pretty competent QB2 there. So I think that helps. It's one thing I don't think, fantasy prognosticators maybe take into account. I mean, quarterback injuries are fairly rare, but how big of a drop off is it from QB1 to QB2, and how bad is the QB2? Because there is a wide variety of QB2s in the league, and if you've got a really bad one, that's going to tank your team's numbers.
Okay, I'm glad that I think we're on the same page there. That they're basically I view them two as the same quarterback. I don't really view much of a difference for them as a fantasy quarterback, but then also for how we should be treating London and Pitts. I think London is still a wide receiver 1. I think Pitts is just because of the nature of the tight end position, but probably like a top 10, maybe even top 8 tight end still. Spike weeks, bad weeks, it's all going to come and go with that Falcons offense. But we'll see. Maybe Stefanski can get a little bit more out of them than what Zach Robinson was able to. We'll have to see. But at least, like you mentioned, Tua and Penix, not much of a difference, which is safer and probably better than a lot of people want to admit from a fantasy standpoint because of how much worse it could be at the quarterback position. You had mentioned Mike LaFleur as a possibility for the connection for Malik Willis. I thought he was going to sign in Arizona. And this is just kind of the final wrap up for the quarterback position because we're still waiting on Kyler Murray, who was officially released. Aaron Rodgers needs to do his yearly offseason shenanigans. So we'll see if he goes back to Pittsburgh or somewhere else. Kirk Cousins is getting some hype as a potential starter as well, also having been released from the Atlanta Falcons. So we still need homes for those 3 players as of the time of this recording. But I mentioned as the last final quarterback news, I guess, is Arizona had signed Gardner Minshew to what looks like a backup deal because they announced that they're looking at sticking with Jacoby Brissett for the 2026 season, which sounds super exciting from a fantasy standpoint. Sounds super depressing if you're an Arizona Cardinals fan, I bet, because he did not win games. But because he wasn't winning games, he was throwing an absolute bunch. And that was great for Trey McBride, great for Michael Wilson. It was even great for Marvin Harrison for a couple of those games as well. He was often injured throughout that second half stretch. with Brissett at quarterback, but there were a couple games in there where Brissett really honed in on Marv, and it looked like he was going to be, the type of player that he was drafted to be. So Brissett staring in Arizona again. I'm kind of just want to read your temperature on what you're thinking about for this kind of Cardinals pass catching quarterback offensive group as a whole.
Yeah, I don't know if it's really Brissett losing. I mean, his quarterback record is, wasn't good last year. 1-11, I guess, as a starter. So 12 starts, 14 games he appeared in. Completed 65% of his passes, 64.9%, 3,366 yards passing, 23 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Nothing alarming there. Average of 240 yards passing per game, which is interesting because that's quite a bit when you assume that when you factor in the fact that he had 2 games where he appeared in and didn't start. So that number is even higher for his starts if you just take his passing yards divided by his starts. So from a fantasy standpoint, like he was one of the top 6 or 7, I think, quarterbacks during his stretch of starts. So he is certainly intriguing, and it just sort of depends on do they draft a rookie? Do they wait until they lose a lot of games this year and try to draft a really good one next year? Because you could see him getting benched halfway through the season if it's a lost cause and they've got a rookie that they want to look at. But he's like the perfect bridge quarterback this year, I think, and it's great from a fantasy standpoint for the receivers there, Wilson and Harrison, who did not have a great year last year. Obviously, Trey McBride. So I think these guys are all going to get supported if this defense is still pretty bad, and Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback.
I was trying to think of, because I remember there was the whole tank for Tua thing with the Miami Dolphins in the 2019 season. I was trying to think of what that alliteration phrase would be for Arch Manning for 2027, and I can't think of a good A word. Ache for Arch? That's probably not it.
Is he
I think that
he's the consensus QB1 for next year?
seems like I don't know if it's just attaching the Manning name to him. I mean, he looked really good for Texas over the second half of the year. Other people might say it's Dante Moore, who went back to school out of Oregon. Still have Lenore Sellers, and I'm a big John Mateer fan. I don't think he's going to translate all that well, but I just like watching him play out of Oklahoma. There's a couple other names in there too. So next year's class is definitely a lot better for quarterbacks, and if they're trying to go for the potential top one, I feel like consensus would say that it's Arch. So we'll just have to see. My one fear with Jacoby Brissett is that we oftentimes see these backup quarterbacks do well in small sample sizes, and then they try to do it again the next year, and we're reminded why these guys are actually just backup quarterbacks. Now, Brissett had a pretty decent sample size of games. Like you mentioned, it was pretty much 11 games last year. That's relatively decent. But my fear is that, we kind of saw him do it with New England where he was good enough, but then really kind of wasn't all that good. I think about Gardner Minshew having that great season and then just didn't do. I mean, he looked awful on 3 different teams basically over the past couple of years. I see a lot of bad that could potentially come out of this for Brissett that then also then filters down to McBride and Marv and Michael Wilson and the running game and stuff like that. So I love the upside based on what he did last year. I'm just hesitant to translate it 1-for-1 into 2026 is where I'm at with him.
Yeah, I think it's a volume issue. Looking at his stats from previous years, 447 pass attempts in 2019 in 15 games, 469 in 15, 16 games in 2017. Both of those were for the Colts. Last year, 485 pass attempts in 12 starts, 14 games appeared. So they definitely were having to throw the ball a lot more. I think he's capable, even if he did have a good year and you're worried about him possibly taking a step back. I just think this is like Blake Bortles type stuff where just garbage time, having to catch up, having to try to score, and he's capable of throwing it a lot and completing passes. So
it looks like as we're recording, we just got another name that dropped. We'll verify that, and then we will hit that whenever we get to that position. But we got to talk about Just a couple of tight ends. Travis Kelce's back for one more year with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I feel like that's pretty good. I think he was the tight end 3 last year in fantasy. So I feel like that's pretty status quo for Travis Kelce. The big signing was Isaiah Likely going back, or I should say not going back, but following Harbaugh to the New York Giants. So that one is pretty fun. And then Chig Okonkwo going to the Washington Commanders. You had mentioned Dulcich signing back with Miami. A couple others small like Daniel Bellinger to Tennessee may not be as interesting for him, but with Chig Okonkwo leaving, I personally had some excitement for Gunnar Helm at Tennessee. So there's just kind of some of the lower level tight end moving parts, but I feel like the big one is Kelsey staying likely with the Giants and Chig Okonkwo to Washington. So if you want to hit on one or all three, or give your thoughts on just kind of the tight end free agency movement.
Yeah, you mentioned Gunnar Helm. He was one of my deeper sleepers with Chig Okonkwo entering free agency. I didn't know if they were going to let him walk or not, and they did. They did sign Daniel Bellinger, and he's always been kind of an interesting name because George Kittle a few years ago, when asked, who's next at the position, Bellinger was one of the three guys that he mentioned. And he never really panned out as a pass catcher, just here and there with a couple of good games. Theo Johnson eventually took over that role, pass catching role last year, and did it well. So I think Gunnar Helm is still sort of interesting here in Tennessee. He's going to be a tight end 2 sleeper. Had a good rookie season, and a lot of rookie tight ends tend to not have very good seasons. It's usually year 2 where the breakout happens, and he certainly is going to see, I would think, a big uptick in playing time. So that's good for him. Isaiah Likely is a funny story with, just sort of things, the way things were headed in Baltimore. We thought that they were going to, put Mark Andrews out to pasture eventually, and Isaiah Likely would be the tight end of the future there in Baltimore. They tended to sort of play him, like favor him, I guess, in the passing game at times. That was frustrating for Mark Andrews managers, but they ended up re-signing Mark Andrews. The Ravens did, and then Isaiah Likely is now in with the Giants. And you mentioned he's with John Harbaugh, who knows what to do with him. And I think this is just the problem here, is that it's a downgrade for Theo Johnson, who is a really good athlete as well. They're probably going to lean into 2 tight end, 12 personnel, and with Blake Neighbors at receiver, and try to go that way with it because they don't have a deep receiving core there, especially with Wan'Dale Robinson moving on. So I hope that's the case, where we've got Likely and Theo Johnson on the field 70-80% of the time, both of them, because they could both be tight end 2 types, and maybe one of them could be a tight end 1 type with Jackson Dart throwing the ball. So that's sort of what I'm looking at there draft wise. They're in the tight end 2 rankings. And then Okonkwo is really intriguing in Washington. He, at times has looked like a world beater, and at times just has completely disappeared. But, over the last 4 seasons, he ranks 17th in receiving yards at the position amongst tight ends. Last season, set career highs with 56 catches for 560 yards. And what makes him intriguing is his age. He's just now entering his prime. He turns 27 in September. The prime ages, using our production curve study at 444, the prime ages for tight ends are 26 to 30. So the Commanders are getting him at his peak, and he should have a good run with them. His speed score is 92nd percentile. His burst score is 67th percentile per player profiler. And, there was a report that Zach Ertz was going to be back, but he's a free agent. So if he doesn't return, this really is going to open the door for Okonkwo. And I think you have a Ben Sinnott. Isn't he one of your personal favorites? I don't know if it's gonna happen for you.
Yeah, that one made me sad because I kind of got hit twice, because I wanted Theo Johnson to be a thing in New York, and then I wanted Ben Sinnott to be a thing in Washington, and 2 of the top 3 signings. We still have Dallas Goedert and David Njoku that need to sign at the tight end position, but at least of the guys that have signed so far to new teams, They were the two that seemed just impactful enough to ruin the guys that were already there that I was excited for. So yeah, I think these are going to be interesting flyer tight end names late in drafts, maybe even undrafted, probably undrafted in Chig Okonkwo's case. Um, that are going to be interesting names that you should just know are in new situations and have new possibilities for production. So we are going to move on to the running back position. Then this is the really, really fun conversation because right at the top, at like the beginning of the day on Monday, I feel like the we should have just known what type of free agency we were in for whenever we saw that Kenneth Walker was signing with the Kansas City Chiefs. This was like the perfect, oh my gosh, this actually happened situation. It was like the running back that we'd always been clamoring for to get workhorse touches and opportunity has now gone to the team that we have seen elite running back production out of with an Andy Reid offense with Patrick Mahomes that had such a clear need for the running back position because they have been just horrendous with running the ball over the past like 2+ years. So Kenneth Walker to the Kansas City Chiefs is the big one. I've seen so many different conversations about where his ADP is ultimately going to land in redraft, how high he can actually go. Is this even a good thing for Kenneth Walker to get that much work because of the injury history that he's had? Some of the factors leading to the reason why maybe he hasn't gotten the true bell cow workloads in Seattle was because of the injury history with pairing him with Zach Charbonnet. So where are we at with Kenneth Walker here? You have those way too early rankings. I want to see where your vibe check is right now with him among running backs or even where he's at overall in ADP.
Yeah, it's a really good fit because they've got Rashard Smith there, who's significantly better as a pass protector. Walker, you mentioned his injury history, so that's one knock against him. The other is that he's pretty atrocious as a pass protector. That's one thing I look at when a player of this caliber changes teams is like, is this guy going to actually be a three down back? And he has not shown in his career that he is a capable pass blocker. So with Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, probably not going to have him on the field as a full-time three down back. So we're looking at him as like Isaiah Pacheco's heyday, maybe a few extra touches and carries, not coming off the field as a ball carrier as much as maybe Pacheco did, splitting time with Kareem Hunt over the last couple seasons. But I think the two of those players, Rashard Smith and Kenneth Walker, complement each other really well. And you're going to see, I think, Smith on third downs. So you're looking at a 2-down role, but also for a team that scores a lot of touchdowns and obviously has one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the game. So plenty of rushing lanes for him to run through. I think it's a great fit for him. I've got him at RB 14, and he's just behind, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Marion Hampton. So not quite in that 3-down bell cow lane, but he's certainly high end RB2 now with this move to Kansas City.
Good. Okay, so we're kind of on the same wavelength on this one as well. I think I saw some people asking the question to whether or not he should be a first round pick in drafts, and I think that that's kind of insane, just given the talent that we have at the wide receiver position as well. Not even just at the top of the running back position. Some other guys, like you want to talk about free agency with David Montgomery getting traded, and what does that do for Jahmyr Gibbs? Tyler Algier's gone. What does that do for Bijan? We still have the other, kind of elite names like Saquon and James Cook and Devon Achane, and you mentioned like Henry still in there, still moving. Chase Brown, can he have a full season of what he's done twice at the end of second halves for 2 years in a row? A lot of names at the running back position, a lot of hype for Kenneth Walker for sure. I think that if he sneaks into the second round, I probably will be fading him. If he's a third round pick, that gets a little bit more interesting, I think, for sure. The other name, honestly, the two names that we're about to talk about next are way more intriguing to me because I think when you factor in the cost that it's going to take to acquire these guys in drafts, I think they're going to be a lot more attractive to me than Kenneth Walker in Kansas City. The first is Travis Etienne signing with the New Orleans Saints. Alvin Kamara is still there, so he may or may not be moving on after this. But after that, I mean, Devin Neal got injured at the end of last year. There was Audric Estime, and did they have Evan Hull as well? I think was the other
Yeah,
running
I think
back that they
so.
had at
Yeah,
the
I
end of
think
the
they
year.
did. Yep.
Sheesh. So yeah, they definitely need a running back as well. And they paid up for Travis Etienne on a 4-year deal at 27 years old, which I think is also pretty interesting from a dynasty standpoint. But for 2026, I think Etienne is going to be a really, really strong, like RB2 with RB1 ceiling kind of guy that is not going to cost as much as Kenneth Walker. He might be a fourth round type of an ADP that I could see the two of us talking about pretty heavily in the summer as a more mid round target, given his skill set with what I believe to be an ascending New Orleans Saints offense with Tyler Shuck, Chris Olave. You add Etienne to that. They signed a guard who I believe graded as a top 20 or 25 guard on PFF for 2025. So that enhances their offensive line as well. I just think that Travis Etienne to New Orleans at his price point for where I expect him to be ADP wise is going to be way more attractive to me than Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he lands ADP wise and, alongside Walker in the rankings. Is he a few spots behind? Is he many spots behind? I mean, I've got him right now at RB 18. But, I would say Walker, Bucky Irving, Kyron Williams, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, Brees Hall, Cam Scattaboo, if he's reasonably healthy by camp. That's an interesting group of RB2s, and you're getting down to, Scattaboo I have at RB20. Those guys could move around in that tier, I think. But Etienne could potentially move up because he is one of these guys that might be a 3-down back. And we did see him catch a lot of passes last year. And if Kamara moves on, especially, wheels up for Etienne and the New Orleans offense. And this is going to be a spunky offense with Tyler Shuff at quarterback. He showed something last year.
Yeah, I'm personally pretty excited. The other one that you had just mentioned as well, that didn't happen really for free agency. Jerry Jones got in there just in time, which kudos to him. He paid significantly less for Javonte Williams than what Kansas City and New Orleans had to pay for their running backs. But Javonte staying in Dallas on a 3-year deal, and basically just running back whatever he had last year. So are you feeling just pretty status quo on Javonte? I know you just said he's in that mix of like a top 20 kind of guy, but another guy that, if he's like a 5th round pick again next year, 4th, 5th round pick, also be a pretty interesting target, especially if you get a wide receiver early.
Yeah, he got that the bell cow work, which we weren't for sure going to see. We weren't sure what was going to happen with the Dallas backfield, but they kind of told us, we like Javonte, and the fantasy community is like, well, it's who it is. It's Javonte. So we've already done this in Denver, but Dallas has their own plan, and he ends up RB11 on the year. Did not play in week 18, so a little bit higher if you look at his per game numbers: 14.1 fantasy points per game, top 10, top 12 numbers there. So I think status quo probably for him, and that puts him squarely in the RB2 mix. I think you could make a case for him being a low end RB1.
The other name, we'll kind of wrap up. You mentioned Bucky Irving. Kenneth Gainwell is signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well. And then that we also got news yesterday, Wednesday, I believe, that the Buccaneers had initially not wanted to tender Sean Tucker. Then they did tender Sean Tucker. So it seems like the Buccaneers backfield, they're going to go into this year with Bucky Irving, Kenneth Gainwell, and Sean Tucker as their 1, 2, 3, with Gainwell kind of taking over this Rachaad White role in this backfield. But I feel like people believe that Kenneth Gainwell is better. I think Kenneth Gainwell might be better than Rachaad White. As a Steelers fan, I can tell you that he was by far the best player that we had on their offense last year. And it was going to be very, very interesting to see what this split is going to be between Bucky and Gainwell for receiving, for red zone touches. The Sean Tucker get the red zone work that he got last year as well. It's going to be kind of a little bit of a mess, I think, to clearly work through. We have a new offensive coordinator as well as Zach Robinson. He said some pretty favorable things about Bucky Irving whenever he was hired. So how are you feeling about Kenneth Gainwell in Tampa Bay? What's that effect on Bucky Irving? What are we thinking here?
I think the Bucky Irving impact of this is not great. When Gainwell lands there, you're thinking, okay, well, it looks like Rachaad White is gonna move on. They're just gonna go with Bucky Irving, Sean Tucker, and then some third running back. But they're bringing in Gainwell, who, as you mentioned, had a great year. I think he had 70 plus catches for Pittsburgh
He led
last
the
year.
team in
Yeah.
in receptions.
So this is certainly a ding to Bucky's role in the passing game if this sort of continues with Gainwell as a primary pass catcher out of the backfield. I mean, obviously they don't have um, Aaron Rodgers kind of dinking and dunking and dumping passes off like Pittsburgh did last year, but Bucky at RB15 feels a little high now. I mean, you got Kyron, Javonte, Travis Etienne below him. I could easily see him ADP wise dropping behind those guys and becoming sort of a fourth, fifth round pick. And I think that's a good spot for him. I think he's a talented player and can produce there, but he's just not going to see. We know what the team thought of Irving versus Rachaad White. We don't know with this move what they think of Irving and what their plan is for Gainwell with that duo. So it is a bit of a mystery, and I think it's probably not a great sign that they decided to go out and get Gainwell when they did have a pretty capable RB2 still there, Sean Tucker. So a little worried about Bucky's value here in the next couple months.
Well, just to play devil's advocate for the pro Bucky Irving argument, Rachaad White had 90 receptions over the past 2 years combined. And Bucky obviously was great in 2024. I think was better in 2025 than people remember. His major issue, honestly, was just touchdowns. He only had one rushing touchdown, I believe, and then had a couple receiving. So if that were to increase, which the major issue with him was that Sean Tucker was stealing red zone work, kind of like how Sharp would steal it from Walker, or Allgeier would kind of annoyingly come in and steal some from Bijan. That was kind of Bucky's Achilles heel last year, on top of missing 7 games in the middle of the year. But if we project Gainwell to kind of have this Rachaad White pass catcher slash 140 rush attempt role, that's essentially what Rachaad White has had the past 2 years. And Bucky's been moderately comfortable as a RB2 with RB1 upside, even with that usage. So that's at least the pro argument for Bucky Irving with Kenneth Gainwell still there.
I mean, I think Bucky was heading into last year. I have to check the data or whatever, the draft data, but I think he was, being expected to be an RB1. And I'm looking at his efficiency numbers, and I think maybe he just wasn't fully healthy the entire year, but he was 55th in yards before contact per attempt, 53rd in yards after contact per attempt. This is out of 65 running backs with at least
their
50.
O-line was trashed as well. Like, you got to remember that they lost their tackle immediately.
Yeah.
Before the season started.
37th in broken tackle rate and 54th in PFF rush grade. So, just something to file away when it comes to Bucky. I think he's going to land in those RB2 ranks this year with Gainwell in tow.
To wrap up this whole Tampa Bay movement, all these other players stuff, we just got news as we're recording this that the Washington Commanders have agreed to terms with Rachaad White. So it was basically confirmed that he was going to move on. That's why they signed Kenneth Gainwell. We were waiting at the time that we started this recording for Rachaad White to sign. He was basically the best free agent left. But it sounds like he's on his way to Washington to reunite with Jaden Daniels. They played at Arizona State together 5 years ago in 2020 and 2021. And he was the RB1 for Jaden Daniels for the Sun Devils, had 1,000 rushing yards and 450 receiving yards on 225 touches. Did Rachaad White 16 total touchdowns. We have seen Rachaad White in a volume role for Tampa Bay be was he top 5 a couple years ago in fantasy? I think he was, if I remember that correctly. It was just so volume dependent, but I think he got there by the end of the season. That we've seen at least fantasy production out of Rachaad White. And if he's coming in to kind of get ahead of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and they don't add anybody else significant, he's a pretty interesting kind of mid to later round running back that you could stock up onto your bench and see if you have something in him. I don't know. This literally just happened, so you haven't really had much time to think about it, but initial reactions to Rachaad White in Washington.
Well, I think it's a good landing spot for him. He has shown that he can be the lead back. And you mentioned 2023 was the year where he saw 272
300 something.
carries, 272 carries for 990 yards. Really pathetic 3.6 yards per carry, but the volume was there, as you mentioned. 64 catches for 549 yards and 3 touchdowns. He ends up RB7 that year.
Okay.
So this is a great landing spot because the Chris Rodriguez is out of the way.
Hmm.
And we're just dealing with Bill, and Bill wasn't great last year. So I think you're looking at Rachaad White RB1 season in terms of at least the RB1 for the Commanders, and I think that will put him squarely probably low because it's Rachaad White, not the biggest name at this point. He's probably going to be in that 18 RB18 to RB24 range as the once we sort of figure it out that he is the starter. I think that's kind of where he's going to land. 5th rounder feels like to me.
I could see him being a little lower. I was going to say maybe
Yeah.
6th or 7th. Like where Chuba was last year. Was Chuba a 5th rounder? Pollard, maybe in that range of where he was last year, I think. Somewhere in there. I think the final domino that's going to drop from this Washington signing is from my dynasty standpoint, I've been on Jeremiyah Love watch for a while now, and we have basically eliminated 3 potential landing spots from him from free agency that were in the top 12. Kansas City, New Orleans, and Dallas were all top 12 picks this year that had they not signed free agents that they then could have drafted Jeremiyah Love would have been phenomenal for the rookie RB1 in this class. Washington has kind of been my saving grace team that I had been hoping that he would go to. I don't know if Rachaad White is a big enough name or if this is a big enough signing to prevent them from drafting Jeremiyah Love at 7, but I know that Love has also been linked to the Tennessee Titans at 4 and the New York Giants at 5. So this is just where I'm heading towards. Is we're gonna obviously Jeremiah Love is going to be a big name from come redraft time in August, but with Cam Scadaboo doesn't necessarily feel safe right now. They were also linked to Kenneth Walker. Tennessee, I think they have way more holes to address than the running back position, but that might nuke Tony Pollard / Tyjae Spears, or if Love falls to Washington, that might be how Rachaad White is not necessarily the most relevant running back come August, or some other team's going to trade up for him, and then we're going to have some other veteran running back get absolutely nuked by Jeremiyah Love coming in. So that's kind of the final domino, I think, for all this.
Well, it happens every year where we get excited about a player fit, and all of a sudden a top tier rookie comes in and just nukes the player, as you so eloquently put it. So that's certainly the case where Rachaad White does not preclude the Commanders from drafting a running back early. So yeah, that's something to keep an eye on.
Another big running back signing, Tyler Allgeier, moving on to the Arizona Cardinals. This is that basically came in the wake of they had talked about releasing James Conner, but then he had reworked the deal to stay with the Arizona Cardinals. So Conner's going to be there again. They have Trey Benson, their 2nd-round pick from a couple years ago, who got injured right as soon as he got the opportunity after James Conner went down last year, never came back. They also re-signed Bam Knight to a 1-year deal. I don't think that necessarily matters in the grand scheme of things, but they've been making moves at the running back position to try to address the running game, which was another reason why Jacoby Brissett just threw the ball so much last year, is because they just could not run the ball. So we've got Tyler Allgeier coming in. He feels like a younger version of James Conner to me. Conner's coming back. Trey Benson's going to be back. It's a big mess right now. Personally, I'm a big Tyler Allgeier fan. I think that he kind of forces his way into being the starter, in my opinion. I don't know if you kind of feel the same way about him.
It's going to be an interesting. This is not the spot I would have picked for him, but the seas could part for him fairly quickly. Depends on James Conner, Trey Benson's health. James Conner is turning 31, so he's hitting that running back wall, that area where the production just kind of falls off a cliff. Allgeier was not awesome last year. He had 3.6 yards per carry. He still has a 4.3 career yards per carry. He was 47th in yards before contact per attempt, 57th in yards after contact per attempt, 30th in broken tackle rate, 41st in PFF rushing grade. But the year prior, he was 12th in PFF rushing grade, 8th in yards after contact per attempt. So I think that's what the Cardinals are hoping he can get back to and perhaps be the feature back here. It's possible. They're, 31-year-old James Conner, coming off of injury, Trey Benson, neither are really fully locked in as the Cardinals starter. So it could be Allgeier. So he is, I think, or especially early in best ball, depending on how late he's going, because I think people looking at the signing are probably thinking, he'll, it's Tyler Allgeier. He'll probably back up Connor or he'll back up Benson. He might end up being the starter. So he might be a double-digit round pick here in the short term.
When the Cardinals had signed James Conner, they initially signed him to a 1-year, $1.75 million deal after his rookie contract expired with the Steelers. And then that season, he was competing with Chase Edmonds, only had 750 rushing yards, 375 receiving yards, so he got over 1,100 total. But that was his 18 touchdown season that he got a 3-year extension after that, kind of became he did become the future running back starter for the Arizona Cardinals through, his mid-20s into what he's kind of become today. And that's the path that I see for Tyler Allgeier. They paid Allgeier more money contract-wise and year-wise to kind of come in, and I think ideally they want him to be their guy that they can lean on. Maybe not at the start of this year. Maybe he tries to get worked in a little bit, but through the future, the second half of 2026 into 27, I think it's going to be Tyler Allgeier. The other kind of, we'll say kind of bigger name running back, there's some other running backs we still got to talk about, but David Montgomery, this wasn't a free agent move, but he got traded to Houston for a 4th, 7th, and an offensive lineman because Houston, for some reason, just can't stop trading offensive linemen away, thinking that they have some massive surplus of them, like they don't have one of the worst O-lines in the league. But David Montgomery is coming in here to the Houston Texans. He's going to be another interesting name to come in and compete with Woody Marks, with Nick Chubb still being a free agent, probably not re-signing as well. So it feels like the floor is that Montgomery plays the Chubb role last year with Marks as the kind of RB1B / pass catcher. But I think we all know that David Montgomery is a better running back than what Nick Chubb was at this point in his career. And I also think that, they paid more for David Montgomery himself than they paid for Joe Mixon and Woody Marks combined. Marks was a 5th round pick. They paid a 7th for Joe Mixon. They paid more than that for Monty in this trade alone. So I think Houston just wants to do this. They just want to trade for cheap veteran production, and they're just going to give David Montgomery the rock 250 plus times. I think that's how I'm seeing it. I'm curious if that's how you view it.
I think the backfield split is kind of to be determined. I'm not going to, at this point in his career, anoint David Montgomery as sort of the bell cow there. But I think if he stays healthy, 250 carries is, within reach for him. I think the question is, how much of a role does he have in the passing game? He's certainly a capable pass catcher. He showed that in Detroit and Chicago. But Woody Marks, I don't think that they wanted him to go into the season as their primary option on first and second downs. His underlying metrics were not very good. He's better, in the passing game. So I think it's kind of like the Chiefs situation where you got your first and second down banger, and then you've got your third down back come in. So that sort of limits upside, I think, of both players, especially given their offensive line. They're not going to score as many touchdowns as the Chiefs do, so not as appealing of a fantasy landing spot for him. But this is certainly an upgrade, I would think, for him, just because he was getting pushed out of the backfield in Detroit. And, it's obviously wheels up now for Jahmyr Gibbs. It's already been wheels up, but now it's really wheels up.
Yep. I think if you told me he was this year's like Ramondre Stevenson, I wouldn't be surprised, essentially, with in terms of where he would be falling ADP and over exceeding in that through sheer volume with production as well. The final names for the running back position: Rico Dowdle signs in Pittsburgh, J.K. Dobbins re-signing in Denver, Isaiah Pacheco is taking on the Monty role as the backup to Jahmyr Gibbs. You mentioned Chris Rodriguez moving on. He signs in Jacksonville to compete with Bashaw Tutin for the possible RB1 role there. And then Keaton Mitchell signing with the LA Chargers. I think these are all very interesting names that could find either at least handcuff relevance to possible flex consideration relevance with pass catching work or touchdown upside in these respective offenses, that they are at least worth mentioning to wrap up the running back position here. So you can talk about you can talk about one of your favorites, however you view this with this group of running backs.
Yeah, and there's a list here. So I'm typing into the thing where everybody has landed, because otherwise my 52-year-old brain might misspeak. Where did Pacheco land?
Detroit.
Detroit. Okay, there we go. All right,
Yep,
so
yep.
that all makes sense. This is the revolving doors here. Rico taking over the Kenneth Gainwell role, but I don't think he's going to be the pass catcher. You're probably going to see Jaylen Warren as the pass catcher there. Rico more of a first, second down type of guy, but he's capable of catching passes out of the backfield. But I think the split probably stays pretty similar to last year. Dobbins had a really good year prior to injury, so his return, if you just look at his games played, it's not very high in terms of his percentage of games played. He misses like 8 games a year in the last 4 years. So I think you can still probably count on him getting dinged up, but when he's healthy, he's going to be a thorn in RJ Harvey's side. They're just going to be running a committee, I think, in that backfield, because I think Dobbins is, when healthy, is effective enough to, earn significant touches there. Pacheco, I don't think at this point is on the same level as David Montgomery, although David Montgomery has kind of trended down in the last year or two. I think he's going to be more of just the occasional, first, second down kind of guy, but I don't think they're going to take Jahmyr Gibbs off the field as much as they did maybe with Montgomery in that backfield. So I think Pacheco's more of a pure backup. And then the other two names here, Chris Rodriguez for Jacksonville is pretty interesting, because he's being reunited with Liam Cohn, who, if I'm remembering correctly, coached him at Kentucky. He doesn't bring much as a pass catcher. And, I think I have in my keeper league, I have Bashial Tootin, and I was looking forward to keeping him as a prospect, but now it looks like he is going to be, in a committee here. And I think it's going to be Rodriguez on first and second down. He's averaged 4.8, 4.9, 4.5 yards per carry in his 3 seasons. In 2024, or was it 2025? He ranked second in yards after contact per attempt, 5th in broken tackle rate, 21st in PFF rush grade. I think that was, I have a typo there. It's 2025. So his production, and with Liam Cohen going and getting him, looks like it might be the real deal. Etienne vacated 296 touches. So obviously Tank Bigsby was long gone. So he's not much of a pass catcher. He's only got 6 career catches, but he did have 13 catches in 2021 under Liam Cohen as the OC in Kentucky. So maybe if, he could be like a 20 catch guy, that would be a significant upgrade for him in terms of his passing role. So this will be interesting to see how this shakes out. But to me, them going to get Rodriguez and him being so effective last year in Washington leads me to believe that he's going to be the first, second down guy there. But we'll see. They have to, have a camp and competition and all that. The other one that's interesting is Keaton Mitchell, who is diminutive. His issue is he's 5'8" and 179 pounds, but he's also a superb athlete. He's also got a career 6.3 yards per carry. He was 5.8 yards per carry last year. 98th percentile 40-yard dash, 87th percentile burst score, 59th percentile speed score at Player Profiler. He was first in yards before contact per attempt, first in yards after contact per attempt, second in broken tackle rate, and second in PFF rush grade. That was back in 2023. Last year, he was first in yards before contact per attempt, 20th in yards after contact per attempt, 53rd in broken tackle rate, and 64th in PFF rush grade. So the Chargers are hoping for more of a 2023 production than 2025. But he's an intriguing ad for that backfield, and I think it puts a bit of a dent in Marion Hampton's ceiling because he could work his way in and be a, I don't want to say Darren Sproles type, but maybe kind of a Darren Sproles type in with the Chargers.
Yeah, and you gotta remember that McDaniel, even though, HN was phenomenal with McDaniel the past couple of years, but he also likes to kinda rotate these guys in a little bit. We saw some Jalen Wright, we saw some Raheem Mostert with HN as a rookie. We saw some Ollie Gordon as well. So if Mitchell can come in here as kind of like a pass catcher, that is, as you mentioned, that might ding Hampton's ceiling, ultimate ceiling, if he's not gonna be like a 50, 60, 70 reception type of guy because Mitchell's stealing a good number of those. Personally, I'm a big fan of Rico Dowdle in Pittsburgh. He reunites with Mike McCarthy, who um, made him a 1,000-yard rusher in Dallas a couple of years ago before he signed with Carolina. So I'll be interested to see how that split ultimately shakes out between Rico and Jalen Warren. It might be ugly as they're both there, but as we saw with Rico last year with Carolina, when Chuba was out, Rico was phenomenal. Jalen Warren missed time last year. If Warren were to miss time this year, Rico could be great in those games, and vice versa. If Rico were to miss games, I think Jalen Warren would be great. So, not bad to have either one of those running backs stashed later in your drafts because they probably really won't cost all that much as depth pieces. That's going to be it for the running back position. We finally just have to get to this wide receivers, which the big news of the wide receiver position that we got, of course, very early on Monday, we got the Kenneth Walker news to Kansas City, which was great. But then we got the big one in terms of actual contract and signing, which was Alec Pierce, the 4-year, $100+ million deal with the Indianapolis Colts. And then they parlayed that by then trading Michael Pittman to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a day 3 pick swap or something. And then just recently, I didn't talk about this with the quarterbacks because I think we can just try and talk about the Indianapolis Colts as a whole. But Daniel Jones then also officially signed a massive 2-year deal as well to stick with Indianapolis for 2026 and 2027, rehabbing, of course, off of that Achilles tear from midseason last year. But I mean, we can talk about both of these teams here, maybe more so on the Colts side, just because Pierce is staying, but then Pittman left. But then you can also talk about Pittman and his impact with the Pittsburgh Steelers, though I think that conversation is a little bit harder to talk about right now because we're still uncertain about their quarterback situation, whether it's Rodgers or do they make the move for Kyler Murray? Do they just let Will Howard take over? What does Pittsburgh do there? We're not super sure, but we have a clear picture, I should say, I think, for the Colts offense with Daniel Jones, Jonathan Taylor, Alec Pierce, Tyler Warren, and Josh Downs as the projected wide receiver 2 right now. So the floor is yours. Take this however you want with these two offenses.
Pierce had the breakout 4th season, 47 catches, 1,003 yards, 6 touchdowns. He was a low-end wide receiver 3 on both a full season and per game basis. His receiving grade was 16th out of 80 qualified receivers. He was also 16th in yards per route run. So that's all encouraging for a 26-year-old who's just now entering his prime. He also has a nice rapport with Daniel Jones. It was 11.5 yards per target from Jones to Pierce, which was the best by a good margin of the Colts' primary pass catchers. So they have a good connection. Just a matter of
like 22 yards per reception as well, or something.
Yeah, he's a deep ball guy. I mean, 47 for 1,000 yards. Definitely, high A dot guy. So, you're not going to, from a PPR standpoint, you're not going to see, a bunch of 6, 7 catch games, but he's certainly a fantasy producer. And with Pittman out of the way, interesting to see what they do at receiver, because they do have Josh Downs, who we know is a good route runner, but has been a little bit underutilized in that offense, with Pittman and Pierce both, playing a little bit better last year. If they're done at receiver, then, Downs becomes an interesting sleeper. But they also have Tyler Warren there, as a top 2 target at tight end. Jones is interesting. Re-signing, was a top 7 or 8 fantasy quarterback until he got injured. I wouldn't expect necessarily that production again as defenses, get more familiar with him and try to stop him. Uh, but and how much is he going to run coming off the Achilles? Like, I think that's a real concern with him because he is sort of a 12 to 15 yard type runner, where he adds that to his fantasy line. Yeah, in Pittsburgh, you touched on it. We just don't know who the quarterback's going to be, and right now, that's not good for DK Metcalf or Michael Pittman at this stage of the game. So remains to be seen. Ideally they sign somebody like Jacoby Brissett, but they don't expect to be maybe as bad defensively as the Cardinals are. So the volume probably won't be there. So you're looking at probably run heavy offense again with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that means Pittman and DK Metcalf are going to be like wide receiver 3 types.
They need to sign Joe Flacco so he can complete the AFC North.
I like it.
I was going to say trifecta, but that's for 3. I don't know what's a quadfecta. That doesn't sound like a good word.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if it was Flacco, I'd be very interested. But I think that's a pretty good rundown. I'm scared about Daniel Jones coming off of the Achilles injury. I don't know how that's going to impact all the pass catchers. I'm probably going to end up being out on Alec Pierce's ADP. I'll be in on Tyler Warren. I'm going to be massively on Josh Downs. You mentioned that his issue has been he's been the wide receiver 3 buried behind the 2 other outside guys. But if he's going to be playing on 2 wide receiver sets, that's going to be phenomenal for him. If he's more of a full-time wide receiver, competing for targets with the issue is that he not only had to compete for targets, but he had to compete for snaps. So now if he's not competing for snaps and just competing for targets by being on the field, I think Josh Downs can win competing for targets with the other 2 just as much as the other 2 can get targets away from him. So I think I think he's a massive post-hype sleeper for 2026. I can already see the video that I would be creating for that come the summer of post-hype sleepers, and it's right there with Josh Downs number 1. So I'm going to be really in on him. I'm not going to be drafting DK Metcalf, and I might dabble in some Michael Pittman, but that's quarterback dependent. Of the 2, I prefer Pittman. I think just from a safety fantasy floor, he's much more the type of guy that I would be drafting. As a Steelers fan, I'm pretty excited. I want Will Howard. Don't know if we'll get Will Howard, but I just want to see what happens. And if he sucks, we'll get a top 10 pick. We'll never have top 10 picks, and we can draft a quarterback next year. I don't know why they don't just do that, but whatever. Moving on, at least at the wide receiver position. The other big signing, I mean, I like a lot of these signings. There really wasn't a signing that I didn't like, but Mike Evans moving over to the San Francisco 49ers just feels like the chef kiss move that we needed for everybody involved. It frees up Emeka Ibuka. It frees up Chris Godwin. It really helps with Brock Purdy getting an outside receiver that is an upgrade off of Juwan Jennings. We both really like Juwan Jennings, but Mike Evans is better than Juwan Jennings. I think that this helps Ricky Pearsall as well. I think that means that if we have more defensive coverage on Evans, then that could help Pearsall as long as he stays healthy. I think that that's okay for Pearsall. This is good for Christian McCaffrey. Again, more defensive coverage to the outside with Evans there means less defensive coverage on him. I think it's just good for everybody involved. And obviously it's good for Mike Evans to be kind of this red zone threat, outside perimeter option in a fantastic offense with Kyle Shanahan. If I saw people say that this is like his Devontae Adams era right now as a red zone threat for the Rams. To me, that is what Mike Evans is going to be. I don't know if he's going to be undervalued or not come drafts, but I bet you I'm going to be looking at his name when real drafts come around.
The concern here is his age for me. He turns 33 in August. If you look at our production curves study, receivers of that age have on average produced 74% of their career baseline. So he's going to have to fend off Father Time here, and he wasn't really able to last year due to injury, which is part of it. As you get older, it's easier to pick up injuries. So that happened last year. He averaged just 46 yards receiving per game last year, the lowest mark of his career. He was 36th of 80 qualified receivers in yards per route run, 1.62 yards per route run. That was a career low. That said, he's still a big-bodied red zone weapon. He still could catch 8 to 10 touchdowns, especially with George Kittle working his way back
Yeah.
from injury. So that could open up some extra red zone targets for him early in the season. I just think his wide receiver one days are far behind him. I think best case scenario with double digit touchdowns, we're looking at maybe a wide receiver 2 type season. But I'm probably going to be ranking him in the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type ranks, probably wide receiver 3 type ranks preseason, just because of um, the durability question, age question. There's just a lot of ways that this can go sideways. But if he plays 14, 15 games, then he could certainly, finish in the top 25, given his ability to catch touchdowns. But as you mentioned, Tampa, Chris Godwin gets a bump, Mekabuka gets a bump, Jalen McMillan gets a big bump because he's going from fourth receiver to third receiver. So it's all good for those guys.
The other big move that I love is Wan'Dale Robinson signing with the Tennessee Titans. He kind of got the overpaid contract because he's signing with a bad team, but it's a team that desperately needs wide receivers, and I'm still a believer in Cam Ward. I This reminded me a lot of Christian Kirk signing with the Jacksonville Jaguars a couple years ago because they had to overpay to pull him over, but it was a similar situation. A kind of a good wide receiver 2 on another team now becomes the overpaid wide receiver 1, you could say, for a former first overall quarterback who had high upside, massively failed as a rookie, whole new coaching staff and system coming in as well. And Christian Kirk had a phenomenal year that year. I think he had 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. So Wan'Dale, having already, he's gotten progressively better every single year with the New York Giants, partially due to the injury that he had as a rookie. But I mean, he was another 1,000-yard receiver last year with only 4 touchdowns. So if we get another 1,000 yards potentially, bump up his touchdowns a little bit, like what Christian Kirk was able to do with Jacksonville. Again, this all hinges on Cam Ward and the viability of the offense, but at least if they're adding pieces in here, I think Wan'Dale Robinson competing with Calvin Ridley and Alec Manor and Chimere DK, it's certainly a fantastic opportunity for him to kind of repeat the success he had with the New York Giants last year after Malik Neighbors' injury.
Yeah, he's coming in as the clear wide receiver 1. I'd be shocked if anybody pushed him for targets. He just is a low A dot possession guy, but he also has some down the field ability, which we saw last year, surprisingly, in a couple games. He finished wide receiver 13 in half PPR last year, wide receiver 11 in full PPR format. So could see him, especially if the team's bad again, also seeing a bunch of garbage time points. So this is a real good sign for his fantasy value. And as you mentioned, if Cam Ward even can get from sort of bad to decent, it'll the whole offense will rise.
He's just a good player. I liked him a lot coming out of Kentucky. He's just a good player, man. I like Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm wishing the best for him. And will probably also be undervalued just because of it's Wan'Dale Robinson, like he's probably gonna be like wide receiver 40 something in the mid to late rounds. Next player in here we have is kind of the other major big wide receiver signing, which was Romeo Doubs. Was it 4 for 80, $20 million a year AAV with the New England Patriots. They had already moved on from Stephon Diggs. So now we've got Romeo Doubs coming in as effectively Drake May's wide receiver 1 for now. We'll have to see. I would imagine that they're probably not done. I would hope that they're not done just for Drake May's sake. But if they don't add anybody significantly better than Romeo Doubs in this room, you could probably project him to be the wide receiver 1 for Drake May. And I think that is elevating his fantasy production just from where he was with the Packers last year. So it's good for him. I think it's good for Kayshon Boutte to kind of maintain that wide receiver 2 role. Low key, I really hope that Kyle Williams can do more than what he did last year. But then when you look at the Packers side of the ball, I think this is great for them as well. It opens like Christian Watson as their wide receiver 1. It opens the doorway similar to what I had talked about with Josh Downs getting potential 2 wide receiver snaps. Does Jayden Reed get 2 wide receiver snaps? Do they try to force Matthew Golden in here as a second-year guy? That could be good for him. So there's just, again, a lot of these signings, in my opinion, were just so good for a lot of people that I think this year specifically is a really, really fun free agency. And even with a player like Romeo Doubs signing to the New England Patriots, so impactful for a lot of other players, but then also Dobbs specifically himself.
Yeah, I think Dobbs kind of underappreciated just due to the varying role that he had in Green Bay, but he always came through, and he was quite often Jordan Love's go-to guy when chips were down. And he was the one that was typically the healthiest as well. So that's big in fantasy. I do think he basically replaces Stephon Diggs in that offense. Diggs had 102 targets last year. He finished wide receiver 20 overall, wide receiver 29 on a per game basis. And I think you could argue that that's sort of Dobbs' upside. If he stays healthy in this offense and retains that wide receiver one role. They have been linked to the A.J. Brown situation in Philly, trying to trade for him
Mhm.
apparently. So
I think they tried to trade for BTJ too.
this might
They're trying to
be
get somebody.
yeah, they're trying to recruit over him. So, be an exercise caution here in these early drafts. Don't go crazy with Romeo Doubs, but I mean, you could see him, you know, if they don't get somebody better, this is sort of a spread it around offense with these, Matt Collins, Booty, Hunter Henry, got a couple of running backs that can catch the ball as well. Like you don't want to go crazy with Dobbs, but I think he could finish wide receiver 2, 3 in that 20 to 30 range that Diggs was in last year. If he gets bumped down, then he's more of a wide receiver 4. If there's an AJ Brown here or somebody like that, then he's probably more of a wide receiver 4 fantasy wise. In Green Bay, you mentioned it. I think the Christian Watson and Jaden Reed were going to play regardless. They might play a little bit more now, but the big bumps are to Dontavian Wicks and Matthew Golden. Wicks is actually a really good route runner, and his hands are better. I mean, his issue a couple years ago where it was drops, and he was getting open at will. And last year he played better, but there's just not enough snaps available for 5, 6 receivers. Especially when Christian Watson made it back. So I think this is a pretty talented group of 4: Watson, Reed, Wicks, and Golden. And they, you're probably still going to be rotating the 4, but that's okay. Now it's a lot easier to find some fantasy value when there's four receivers rotating than when there's 5.
The final wide receiver thing that we need to talk about, again, not free agency, but DJ Moore was traded to the Buffalo Bills for it was DJ Moore and a fifth for the Buffalo Bills' late second round pick, which kind of equates out to roughly a third in total value for DJ Moore. This is another deal where like my buddy had texted me like 5 minutes after this trade was announced, and he was just like, "Hey, who wins for fantasy in the DJ Moore trade?" And my only response was literally just everybody. I mean, I guess like Khalil Shakir takes a hit, but like this is great for DJ Moore, great for Josh Allen, great for Luther Burden, great for Colston Loveland. I mean, this is just phenomenal in so many different ways. How are you viewing DJ Moore and a possible resurgence to finding a wide receiver one role in the NFL with Josh Allen of all people? Or is this another like we might be getting our hopes up too much situation, kind of like what we did with Amari Cooper, maybe a little bit with Keon Coleman, just because it's still Buffalo and they try to do the little, you know, feed a lot of mouths
Yeah.
situation as well.
I was going to say, Josh Allen spreads the ball around. I think that's fair to say. He hasn't really had a stud there since Stephon Diggs. We can go back and
Mhm.
look at that, but I don't think DJ Moore, age 29, falls into stud Stephon Diggs caliber. So I'm interested to see where Moore's ADP lands. I mean, I do think he'll be the top target there. I think there is a possibility of a big season for him to, maybe get back to his 2024 98 catches, 966 yards, 6 touchdowns that year. This last year, his numbers really took a big dip. Some of it was Luther Burden, Roma Dunze, had such a good start to the season. And then Luther, sort of picked up his role midway through. They had Colston Loveland picking up his role, and they just didn't like it just doesn't seem like they liked DJ Moore's effort. And they weren't trying to feed him targets. Now, he had some big games here and there. A lot of them seemed to come when the other players were injured or dinged up. So, I don't think he comes in as like the stud 120, 130 target guy, but he could be the leading target getter there. I think Shakir might have something to say about that. And I'm interested to see where the ADP lands, because it's really going to depend on that. You normally feel pretty good about taking the top target with Josh Allen. So just sort of, where does he land? Is he wide receiver 30? Is he wide receiver 20? I mean, I think that's two very different stories in terms of what you're expecting from him, and how can he return value at that point in the draft.
I was wondering, kind of like where he might land in ADP, and I was just kind of pulling up what ADP was last year. George Pickens sat at wide receiver 28 in the 5th round. Does that feel like over/under kind of for DJ Moore, given his potential upside or downside? Jameson Williams is right around there too.
Yeah, let's see where I moved him to. I moved.
Again, I'm not saying that he's near Pickens right now. This is just where Pickens was drafted.
That makes sense. Summer. I mean, he was a wide receiver 2, we thought, for the Cowboys, but that offense ends up being a lot better, and then Lamb kind of falls off a little bit. But I mean, that makes sense. I have Moore at right now at about wide receiver 38 with Jacoby Myers, okay. Alec Pierce. That might be underselling him a little bit. But I like I said, I try not to go crazy with these older receivers changing teams, especially if I can't kind of guarantee myself that he's going to see 120, 130 targets.
Best ball ADP, according to Draft Sharks, has him at the early 6th round. They don't have what wide receiver he is off the board, but they've got him in the range of BTJ, Marvin Harrison Jr., Cortland Sutton, and then like the rookies, Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Parker Washington. Alec Pierce is about a round after him, so I don't think you're too far off of where best ball ADP has him. And of course, it's best ball, so if you're swinging for the fences of an absolutely insane season for the wide receiver 1 for Josh Allen, that might make a little bit more sense than kind of redraft playing the weekly game and swallowing the risk a little bit harder, So it'll be interesting. Yeah, it's all an ADP game for sure. But that was pretty much it for the wide receiver position. We are still waiting on Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Juwan Jennings, Brandon Ayuk, Debo. Man, that whole entire Niners, former Niners players, because Brandon Ayuk is, I think the Niners confirmed that they were going to release him. So he's going to be on a new team this year. And then Keenan Allen are basically the biggest names left for the wide receiver position that all need to find homes. But I mean, we just nailed a lot of players moving into a ton of different teams. We didn't even talk about some of the lower level wide receivers. Like, it doesn't matter for fantasy, I don't think, but like Khalif Raymond in Chicago, I think it's pretty interesting. The Raiders signed Jalen Naylor, and now they're dealing with all the ramifications of the Ravens pulling out of the Max Crosby deal. So Naylor, I mean, I'm not going to say that he's going to be a player that you must draft late in rounds, but if he became relevant next year, I wouldn't be surprised. There's a couple players like that, lower level wide receivers that signed that might find some sort of significance. Jahan Dotson went to the Falcons as their Mooney replacement. It wouldn't surprise me if some of these names became relevant as waiver wire players in season this year. So,
yeah, they will. Some of these guys are going to pop up, and it's going to be probably related to injury and stuff. But like Dotson, for example, wide receiver 2 with a couple of decent quarterbacks, and Pitts as really the de facto wide receiver 2 there. London, obviously, but one injury to one of those guys, and all of a sudden Jahan Dotson gets back to his rookie production.
Give it to me. He's right there. His Penn State jersey's right. Where is it? Right there on the video. Big Jahan Dotson fan at Penn State. But that's going to wrap things up for the free agency recap here at the end of the week from the free agency period and everything, basically running down through what felt like 30 different names and players in moving situations at the start of the 2026 offseason officially. We have a bunch of rookie stuff to kind of get through the NFL draft, as well as going to shake things up with depth charts and ADP from all their landing spots. And then we're right into the thick of it in the summer. So we still have a little bit more time for you to enjoy some vacation, John, if you didn't feel like you got all that much over the past couple of months. So you still got a little bit of time before major crunch time. But I appreciate you joining me for this off-season video. I'm hoping to get you back for another couple of them throughout more maybe April or May before we really hit July and August. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. And yes, look out for the fantasy free agency winners and losers article next week. So I will kind of highlight some of the things we talked about, and I'm keeping that tracker updated the rest of the free agency period, which free agency doesn't really end, but it's going to wind down as the talent starts to get plucked off the street.
So that's going to do it then. Thank you guys so much for joining. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Leave a review if you're on a podcast. Drop a comment on the YouTube video. Do all that kind of stuff. It really definitely helps us out. It's a very easy, quick, free way to support this podcast and this YouTube channel as well. So thank you guys so much for doing that. And we will see you in the next episode later on the Most Accurate Podcast. Peace.